Welcome to the Elios School of Ministry and Practical Theology as we begin our new topic now on Islam, excuse me, Islam and the Church. Islam was founded in the 7th century for the teachings of Muhammad in Mecca and is one of the world's largest, fastest growing religions with over 2 billion believers worldwide. It shares historically and theological connections with Christianity, including belief in one God and recognition of certain figures such as Jesus and other prophets found in the Old Testament, though understood extremely and very differently than the way the Jews or certainly Christians see them. For the church, understanding Islam is both a biblical and practical necessity, in my view. As Muslim populations grow globally and within Europe, Christians increasingly called to engage with clarity, conviction, and compassion. We have to, um, to converse, to dialogue, and and even to convince that Christ is not what they say he is, but truly is the Son of God, which is one of the tenets they believe in, that he's not the Son of God. But it's crucial, I think, for every Christian to be aware and to be able to define and defend and to demonstrate their faith, which is the goal of this whole ministry of the Bible school. That's the whole premise of it, that every believer will be able to define and defend and demonstrate and distribute his faith. So as Muslims populations grow globally within Europe, Christians are increasingly called to, like I said, to engage with clarity, conviction, and compassion. So these particular teachings coming up will explore the core beliefs and practices of Islam, key similarities and crucial differences with Christianity, and how the church, most importantly, can respond faithfully and truthfully, biblically, to Muslims in truth, witness, and in love. And so let's begin with this. This is a small introduction to this teaching tonight and also for the next 6 weeks. So we're looking at Islam and the church, understanding Islam in the light of the gospel. So let's just go on here. It's interesting, if you just to set the stage here, I want to give you some stats just off the top of my head. It's not on the page here, not on the slide, but just to give you some idea about the population, the Islamic population in the world today. The largest nation, Islamic nation, is not in the Middle East. Yeah, that may have been a trick question. I could have asked you what is the largest population. You might have said Saudi, Iran, actually Indonesia, with 243 million Muslims. Second is Pakistan. The third, interesting enough, is India. India has 200 million Muslims, which is about 15% of their population. That's how big India is. And only 15% of the population is Muslim, but that's the third largest Muslim population per nation. Then you have Bangladesh, Nigeria, 120 million Muslims in Nigeria. Then Egypt, Iran, Turkey, Algeria, and Sudan are the top 10 nations with the population with Muslims per country. Some of the key insights: Muslims are not, most Muslims are not in the Middle East. The largest populations are in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. Again, like I said before, Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. Globally, there are about 2 billion Muslims worldwide, or about 24% of humanity is a Muslim. That's 1 out of every 4 people on the globe claim to be Muslim. Islam is currently the fastest growing religion in the world by far. Just some in Europe now. If you're listening to this video outside of England or outside of Europe, perhaps in Africa, Middle East, Asia, North America, just some facts about Europe. There's about 50 million Muslims in Europe, which is about 77% of the population right now of Europe is Muslim. And the growth of this is driven usually by migration and very high birth rates. And those two factors are key in most of the growth of Islam in Europe. In Europe, the largest countries in Europe with a Muslim population, Russia has 25 million. Turkey probably, I mean, is with the greatest. Again, it spans Asia and Europe, so I'll add it with Europe, but it has 80 million Muslims, but that also splits between Asia and Europe. France has 6.5 million, Germany 5.5 million, the UK 4.5 million, Spain about 3 million. I'm sorry, 2.5 million, Italy 3 million, Netherlands 1.5 million almost. Belgium just touching a million, and Sweden about 800,000. These are statistics that came from 2025, so they're relatively new. They're really up to date. In Europe, the highest countries that have the highest population of Muslims in European countries, Kosovo has 95% Muslim, Albania 60%, Bosnia-Herzegovina 50%. So those are the three biggest as far as the percentage of population of the country, those three countries. In the UK, there's, as I said, about 4.5 million, 7% of the population, with the largest communities in London, Birmingham, Bradford, and Manchester. Islam is the second largest religion in the UK. Again, these are just some facts I picked up from from the web as we begin our understanding of Islam and our examination of it. Key observations: they have Western Europe, France, and Germany, and the UK. The growth was mainly from the last 100 years, and especially into the 21st century. Europe overall is the smallest share globally, but it is steadily increasing. And that, of course, is one of the biggest concerns in every major, certainly Western and even Eastern, but especially Western um, um, European nation. So let me just get on here, and we'll get to some of the other uh, facts and figures and the burden of why we study Islam in this introduction. Sorry about that. So the opening overview here: Islam is one of the world's most he's one of the most or one of the world's major monotheistic religions. Followers are called Muslims, which means those who submit to God. There's a fallacy, and I see this on um, the news a lot when they're interviewing imams when something happens and they have to interview an imam, maybe some disaster or some riot or maybe a bomb went off. And I saw this about 15 years ago, and I was absolutely incensed at me. They were interviewing this imam, and he was just saying, well, yes, as you know, Islam means peace. And so we don't um, support this type of action. Thank God they don't. There's a man who's telling the truth in that. I believe that perhaps, but Islam does not mean peace. Islam means submission, and a Muslim meaning those who submit to God. They do worship one God. It's called Allah, Arabic for God. I have been in the Middle East, and I have been in prayer meetings with Christians, and they're praying, by themselves, and they're praying, and I hear the word Allah quite a bit. I mean, and they speak in Arabic, and it's a word for God. Of course, when a Christian says Allah and when a Muslim says Allah, they're talking about two different ideas of God. But the word Allah itself just means God. The holy book is the Quran, and it's believed to be the literal um, words of God. Some cultural and religious context of the Arab world. It's good to find out. We're going to look how Islam began. Again, just briefly. This is not going to be a course in the cultural understanding of Islam, but we have to set the table here to get into the other doctrines that Islam does purport, and why they do it. What would cause Muhammad to to react such a way, to put himself in a cave to get the revelations and to write the book, and to have such an immediate and almost instant following when he came down with his revelations. And so the cultural and religious context of the 7th century Arab of Arabia, predominantly it was a polytheistic society. There were many, many tribal gods at the time. The Kaaba and Mecca housed numerous idols. That's just like this, the box. So you may see when Muslims go on their Hajj, and that's one of the pillars. We're going to look at that later on tonight. They have to travel to Mecca, and then they go to this is huge block. It's like a box, basically, called the like a Kaaba, and they believe that it was actually constructed by Abraham. And at the time, in the seventh century in Arabia, it was filled with many, many idols. And again, it's a polytheistic society, meaning many, many gods. So tribal loyalty and honor culture was dominant. Economic life was centered on trade routes. And matter of fact, Muhammad was a trader, and he married a very wealthy woman. We're going to get to briefly the life of Abraham to understand some of the man who was credited of starting this religion. And but he was quite wealthy in the trading trade, as it were. There was presence of Jewish and Christian communities all through it. The main social issues were tribal warfare, inequality, and limited rights for women, which are still very much a concern in that area in the world today. So 1,300 years later, they're still dealing with that. But there was three of the major issues around the context where Islam was birthed. And Islam emerged as a call to monotheism, going back to God. In that sense, we have that in Christianity. It's going back to God. If you look at the Old Testament and the prophetic writings of the prophets of the Old Testament, 90% of the prophecies, basically, it is a foretelling. It is a calling back. It's not so much prophecy predicting the future, but it's a foretelling of calling the people back to God, because idolatry was rampant in ancient Israel, and it was rampant in 7th century Arabia. We have all these different cultures coming around. And so it was a call to serve one God, challenge the social injustices, and a unifying force across the tribes, bringing the tribes together. This was the part of the landscape. When you look at Islam, as you look at Christianity, of course, it focuses on one person from an earthly point of view, from a social point of view. And of course, in Christianity, it is Jesus, and people say he's the founder of Christianity. Jesus didn't create a religion, even though we call it a religion, of following after Jesus. He proclaimed the kingdom of God and said, it is within and following him, you have access to the kingdom of God. The main person behind Islam, of course, is Muhammad. It is interesting to compare the two, and we will have a seminar just on Jesus and Muhammad. So stay with us for the 6 weeks following this one. Again, this is just an introduction to wet your whistle, to maybe get you drawn in, and so you can follow through. But anyway, this is now going with the early life of Muhammad. He was born at 570 AD in Mecca, and he belonged to the Quraysh tribe, a powerful merchant clan, like I said before. And he was a merchant of trade, and he was orphaned at an early age. His father died actually before he was born. He was known for integrity. He's called Al-Amin. He's called the trustworthy one, the trustworthy. So he was, again, in his business and in his life, he was well respected. He did meet a woman, and he married a woman when he was 25 years old. She was 50, she was quite older than he was. She was 40, I believe. I think he was 15 years older, if I'm not mistaken. No, I'm sorry, she was 50. She was 25 years older than he was. And he was, uh, yeah, he stayed married with her for many, many years. Matter of fact, they had a 25-year uh, marriage. He only had one wife at the time, and that was the only wife. Muhammad had 11 wives after the death of his first wife. While he married the first wife, and uh, when she died, uh, he had multiple marriages after that. The youngest wife is said to be betrothed around 6 years old, was a relative of his, and consummated at the age of 9. Some scholars say that they don't count the youthfulness of his bride, but some scholars argue that she was in her mid-teens and not 9 years old. Again, that's still debated, but it is true that Muslims, the Quran sanctions up to 4 marriages. A man can have 4 wives, rather, can have 4 wives. The Muhammad had 11, uh, 10 after his first wife had passed away. And the wives were, it's a high value of wives. His wives are called the mothers of the mothers of believers. This is the Quran, 33 and 6, and help preserve the Islamic teaching. We're very much a part of supporting Abraham, Muhammad at that time. The Quran, like I said, allows a man to have 4 wives. So it's interesting that his founder had 10 wives, 11 wives, and yet when he wrote the commands of God, the God said that after Abraham, you know, to have 4 wives. And that's something that, and that's only if the first wife after that approves of the other wives. And I've had in my working with Muslims, and um, again, some of them have been led to the Lord. Some of them we've had some wonderful talks with, and seen also social situations that did not fit well with the English culture, the British culture, and one of which were the multiple wives. And many of them that I saw, a few of them anyway, would have their wife here in Britain, but then go and go back to the place of their birth. Sometimes it's Bangladesh or Pakistan or maybe India or other places, and marry again because the Quran sanctions that. But they cannot bring their wife back into Britain because Britain forbids more than one wife in a legal marriage. And so there's a lot of um, confrontation there. So you talk about Sharia law being enacted in Britain. One of that would be with the marriages. And so there's a lot of contention here. And there's one case that we actually worked on, as was ministered to. This one woman came into our church, and she was absolutely distraught because um, her husband had to visit his family in another country, came back, and then wanted to divorce her because even though he was right to marry again in his eyes, because the Quran sanctions that, he said, um, she was distraught because they had 5 children, and she refused to accept the other wife. And there's a theological um, discussions which I did get part of that. I mean, I explained to what Christians would say and what I believe what God would say in that, but they were under Islamic law. At least the husband was saying this is the Islamic law. It turned out though, and I found that this is quite interesting, is that I had a friend of mine who we actually was a Muslim friend from Afghanistan who we actually led to the Lord, and I brought him with me, and he knew the Quran far, far better than I did. And he really nailed this guy to the wall. And he just said, the Quran sanctions 4 wives, but the other wives after the first wife has to approve of the other wives, which of course she was the first wife. She did not approve. She was arguing this emotionally, obviously, but also arguing it from a theological point of view that the Quran does not say that he was wrong because I did not approve of this, and yet you want me out of the picture because you now married somebody else. Anyway, these are things that we will be getting into in classes for the next 5 weeks. So please stick around. I'm just throwing these things out here. Topics that we will be discussing. Some of these are just general knowledge of things with Islam, but just to set the stage of what we're doing. Again, he was called to be a prophet. At the age of around 40 years old, he was called to be a prophet. The first revelation came in the cave of Mount Hira. The revelation was delivered, so it says, by the angel Gabriel. It sounds familiar. Same angel who came to Mary. He says Gabriel came to him in a cave, and he's 40 years old. And after that, he began to preach on monotheism. He began to preach, and again, he was a powerful speaker, and began to say, he said, one God, the moral accountability and judgment. Sounds very similar to a Christian message. You know, that there's one God, serve one God alone, the Lord God, He is one. That's straight out of Judaism, the law of Moses, the moral accountability to live righteously, and also judgment. And so it caught on really fast. Interesting, he was in the cave for 3 years. The Quran, it took 3 years to put together, and Muhammad is the sole author. And we are going to compare the Quran and the Bible in our future seminars, but just as a base for this, if you look at, there's a lot of differences between the two holy books. The Muslims call the Quran the holy book, and of course we have the Bible. The very obvious one is that the Quran took 3 years to write with one author. The Bible that we believe, Christians believe, is the Word of God, took over 1,500 years to write, with 40 different authors, all with the same theme and with different occupations. Some were Pharisees, some were prophets, some were shepherds, some were fishermen. They all had the same theme. It's amazing. Again, we did a whole course on bibliology. Please go back to our website, look at the past teachings in the Elio School. At the end of this class, I can give you the information on that. And we have a whole 6-week course on bibliology and look how unique the Bible is. The Quran, again, was written by one man, took him 3 years to write it, and the impact it had. As soon as he began to preach, there was opposition and his migration began to spread, and it spread rapidly through Saudi Arabia and then through the Middle East. It did face strong resistance in Mecca due to religious and economic disruption. Muhammad then migrated in 622 to Medina. And by this time, he had an army. Again, one of the things with Islam at the very beginning, Muhammad was an astute political leader and also a military leader. One of the biggest comparisons between Jesus and Muhammad is that Jesus was not a military leader. He was not a political leader. He kept saying that I did not come to overthrow Rome. The kingdom of God is within. Muhammad is very much a military leader. This, by the way, 622 marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar. This is when Islam was firmly set in that Muhammad was, placed in, where he is right now. He was the major religion at that time that now was Muslim, and it was conversion and conquest. It is amazing when Muhammad came to conquer the city he came in. And when Jesus came to, if I could put this in inverted commas, conquer the city that he's famous for, which is Jerusalem, Muhammad came with an army on a steed in full glory, with a sword in his hand, and he conquered. Jesus, again, the city associated with his name, of course, is Jerusalem. He came not with an army, but with a group of disciples and followers who heard his messages, shouting Hosanna, riding a donkey, and coming as a Prince of Peace. Not coming to overthrow any government, not coming forcefully and militarily, certainly not. And so right away, one of the biggest contrasts of Christianity and Islam is the contrast with Muhammad and Jesus. And we will get into that in a deeper realm in weeks to come. But that's just one thing. So, but this is 622. So Muhammad now is 52 years old. And it's Islam has really that that control truly and the influence over that area at that time. The life and death of Muhammad established a religious and political community in Medina. He returned to Mecca and unified much of Arabia under Islam. And the growth is amazing. If you look at the timelines, like within 50 years, so 100 years, I mean, Islam is controlling that whole area. And then Muhammad died in 632. And so he died and 52 years old. So let me just go on here. And again, just as an introduction, it's just a very fast introduction to the life of Muhammad and just a general understanding of Islam culturally. But what makes someone a Muslim? This the five pillars, and these are absolutely crucial. If this was a regular classroom in a Bible school, which at one time we had, Yale School of Ministry was this way, and we had tests and papers and grades and everything else. But this would be an absolute essential thing to know, and you'd be tested on this. So please take note of this. You can take a snapshot of this when I put these on here. These are the five pillars of Islam. Not adhering to these five pillars, you are not a Muslim. To be a Muslim, you must adhere to these five, what they call five pillars of Islam. The first thing is the Shahada, which is just a statement. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. Every Muslim must state that and believe that. Call it a prayer. You may hear the call of prayer. Living in the East London, I've heard that quite a bit. There's a huge mosque there in East London, especially in the Whitechapel area, if you know London. I think the largest mosque in the East End is that mosque in Whitechapel, and you would hear the call of prayer, and it's that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. You must believe that. Two, you have the Salat, which is prayer, and they are commanded and taught that it's 5 daily prayers and facing Mecca. So every prayer, every mosque, they have prayers 5 times a day. Friday is a very special day. It is interesting that I know shops that have been closed, businesses in the East End because they have to close the shop and they have to go to the mosque and pray. And they have to do it 5 times a day. Do all Muslims do that? A lot of Muslims I know do not do that at all. And this is another thing we could talk about in times, the next 5 sessions about actually how to approach Muslims, how to talk to them about their faith, and even and have them confront them about their practices. As we must be open, they can ask us, are we walking what we believe as well? But this is something you can ask a Muslim. Do you pray 5 times a day, according to the pillars? Number 3, the zakat, which is charity. The Muslims must give, and given the proportion of the wealth to the poor, up to 2.5%. Interesting. The Jewish command of the law of Moses is 10%. Paul's command to Christians is that as you have felt in your heart, as you've laid it on your heart. I mean, tithing is not a Christian teaching. There's nothing about tithing in the New Testament. It's a principle that many Christians follow, and I don't have a problem with that. If it's done by an act of grace and some sort of standard 10%, I'll give 10% or whatever. Most Christians I know, certainly who are involved in the church life and certainly leadership, give far more than that. It may not be even with monetary things, but even with their life or with property and possessions. I mean, it's much more than 10%. But Paul just says, whatever you have purpose in your heart to give, then that is what you are to give. And that's a true understanding of Christian giving. Muslims by law, it's a 2.5% of their income should be given over to charity. There's the Shawm, which is fasting. Of course, we know that is Ramadan. And so every single month, every year, by the way, they have a month of fasting. It's from sunrise to sunset. They can eat as much as they want from sunset to the following sunrise. You can then eat, but once sunrise comes, when it cracks the horizon, no eating, and then you can break the fast when the sun sets. And the last thing is the Hajj, which is a pilgrimage to Mecca. So what that is that it's a journey to Mecca at least once in your life. If you can physically and financially um, make that possible, you must do that. And again, if you can't, then you don't. If you're physically impaired and cannot make it, there's a license that you don't have to do it. But if you don't have that restriction, physically or financially, you are required to visit Mecca. Interesting. If you look at number 2, 3, and 4, this is prayer, charity, or giving, and fasting are are principles in Judaism and also Christianity. Christians should be praying and should be giving and should be fasting, and Jews as well. You look at Matthew chapter 6 in the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus says, and again, these are three spiritual principles that he has commanded, he's teaching his disciples. That when you give, don't let your hand know what your left hand know what your right hand is doing. When you pray, go into your closet and pray secretly with the Father. He will reward you openly. And then also when you fast, don't go around scowling and no, wash your face and don't let anybody, don't go around boasting about your fasting. So when Jesus says, when you do these things, not if you do these things, but when you do these things, you know, this is what you should do. So, and there's a main teaching, a Christian teaching as well, that we should be people of prayer, of giving, and also be fasting. That's my theology. I think all Christians should have a daily discipline, not daily discipline, but a time of fasting, no matter what schedule you have in your own church life or private life when you fast. I think it should be part of the Christian diet as far as that goes. But those are the 5 pillars of Islam. It's good to know these, take a snapshot of that, and so at least when you're confronting or talking to Muslims, at least you know where they're coming from as far as that goes. Some of the key beliefs, a brief overview. Again, I keep saying it again, we will be getting into this in much more detail in the coming weeks. It is strict monotheism. It's one God. There's no other gods. As a matter of fact, you walk into a mosque, you see nothing on the walls. There's no icons either. One of the things that Muhammad was doing was smashing icons. He just, there's no God. There's all this false worship of anything else, any idol. So they would have no. In fact, even you may know that even you can't even make a picture, draw a picture of Muhammad. And so strict are they to that. There's a death sentence if you even draw a picture of Muhammad. And so it's strict monotheism that rules that. Some of the prophets include Adam, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and they have Muhammad. Sound familiar? They're basically taken right from the Judeo-Christian holy books, and also David is a prophet in there. And this is important to know. Again, when you're sharing your faith with Muslims or sharing other things with Muslims, religiously or socially, I have talked about, talk to a Muslim, I've talked about the prophet Jesus many times to them. Of course, to me, he's more than a prophet. He's the priest and king. He is the son of God. He is God. And but he also is a prophet. And I relate to them. I say, yes, I believe Jesus was a prophet, absolutely. And I talk about the prophet David, and I speak of the Psalms. And it's a way to really open up conversation, and especially if you're ministering, that it's a way to have that connection of knowing what they believe, similar to what you also believe. And Jesus is honored as a prophet, but not as a son of God. Again, we've been getting into more how they view Jesus in later teachings. They believe in final judgment and eternal life. Again, they also believe in demons. They call them jinn, Jin, the English equivalent. Transliteration, jinn. It's like the genie in the bottle, the Arabian thing, the spirits, they believe in spirits, they believe in angels and demons. And so, and I've dealt with many Muslims on that level in my personal ministry. But it's good to know that they believe that. So there's an identity. I can see. Yeah, I believe in that as well. They also believe that the Quran is the final and complete revelation. Again, the Quran came over almost 600 years, no, about 300 years after our Bible was canonized, or 200 or 300 years after that. Then Muhammad had his visions in his cave, and he wrote the Quran. And they believe that that is the final and complete revelation, especially in Arabic. I have a funny story with that. As far as getting a Quran that was in English, and I actually received my first Quran. I had it. I lived in New York City on 9th Street, and right on the corner of 9th Street at first was the First Avenue Mosque. And I just purposed in my heart I had to go and talk to these people, I had a dialogue. So I got in touch with the Imam, and I went to the mosque. We started talking. He was a white Western guy, but he converted to Islam. He went to study um, uh, Aramaic languages and Semitic languages and cultures, and he was in Egypt and converted to Islam, became a real master with the language, and he became the Imam. And he was the Imam. I mean, he actually his name was Muhammad, by the way, and but his name really was he was Bruce from Queens. I knew him. He was a New Yorker, but now he's the Imam. So we started talking. And he was absolutely amazed because at that time I was still doing the outreaches, which turned out to be the Church Without Walls here in London. But I was ministering to the homeless every week in New York City. He would see that. And then he began to ask me questions. He found out I was a Christian. I said, yeah, Christians do that. We give, which is one of the five pillars of Islam. We give. And I told him that I was fasting, I was praying, and he was fascinated that Christians do this. He grew up in the church, again, in a Western man. He was from Queens, New York, but had no you know, no conversion to Christ. He had no idea of church. Matter of fact, he was turned off with church and found his religion in Islam. But he was absolutely um, amazed and convicted over the fact that he's a Christian doing these things that Muslims should be doing. The point is, he felt really good. He gave me my first Quran. He says, you must read this, Quran. I said, well, thank you for this. I'll look into it. And it was in English. And the fact of the matter is that they don't consider the English Qurans even valid. I mean, they use them, but they must be written in the Arabic language. So, um, just some key statements and statistics. Some of these we saw before. It's the second largest religion. I'll just go through this again. There's about 2 billion Muslims globally. Fastest growing religion. I'll just put these down here. I think we went over this already. I started with this actually. I kind of flipped it. The majority of Muslims live outside the Middle East. Indonesia, the largest population. Arabic is the language of Islam. The Quran is memorized in full by millions, and that's one of their quests to memorize the Quran. This is interesting. Friday is a day of congregational prayer, and I've seen this firsthand. Living in East London, Fridays you can see in the mosque, and it's so packed. They're even outside on the street praying, and they have to pray. And a friend of mine once confronted me with this or challenged me with this. He goes, Kurt, don't you wish the church was like this? We had churches and people outside the church and everyone's praying and it's packed. And I said, well, our churches here in England and across the West would be absolutely packed if by law we had to be there. And of course, by law, we don't. Jesus commands us to pray, but it's not by law. It's by grace. We do this. And Islam, it's by law, they have to be there. And just an aside here, and not that I'm giving a secret because this is on, on the YouTube, but I've met some of my acquaintances in East London, some shop owners, and they absolutely hate the fact that they have to close their shop and they have to go to the mosque and pray for an hour, lose an hour of business, and then get back and do have their shops. Again, they're not going to leave Islam. They're strong Muslims, but they hate the fact that by law we now have to do this. We have to go to the mosque, and it's one thing and if you go to the mosque and to pray, again, we will get into this later on, but there's a whole cleansing of the body, even the inner ears, the nostrils, they cleanse the whole body, which I was able to when I went to the mosque in East New York, on in the East Village. Muhammad or Bruce from Queens, the imam of the mosque would bring me, show me all the mosque. He showed me the whole thing. He showed me where they worship, how they worship, and also brought me down to the basement where they do the washing. They wash the whole body, and everything has to be clean before they go into prayer. And so it is a nation of law, and that is crucial to understand. Christianity is a religion or belief in God based on grace. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. That is not pronounced over Muhammad. Muhammad is the prophet of God. He just gives, again, to a Muslim, he just gives the law and you obey it. In Christianity, we have a adoption relationship with God. It's a father-son relationship, a father-child relationship. Allah is not called father. He's called master. It's a master-slave relationship. It's by law. And that is crucial to understand. We will get into this later. I'm going to get into just the two branches of Islam, the Sunni and Shia. You may have heard that in the news, Sunni Muslims or Shia Muslims. We will get into what the why they divided and how they divided and the differences between them. So just as we close, friends, before we get into a time of Q&A, hopefully you can stick around for that. Some of the closing statements here in this introduction into Islam. Islam began in the 7th century in Arabia through the teachings of Muhammad. It emphasizes submission to one God, moral living, and community. By the way, this is very important. You see a rise of a lot of Western women. I see this in Britain, converting to Islam. And most of the women that do that are, a lot of them are single moms. They're raised in Christian homes. Like my friend Bruce from Queens, who became the imam. But, the Western, they were raised in Christian homes, were really disenchanted with Christianity. Maybe they had a dull or dead relationship with Christ, still raised in Christian England. But a lot of these women are going to Islam because of the community. They go there and there's a sense of stability, there's families, there's things that they can really get their kids involved in, but they take on the whole discipline of Islam. And so they really stress the community. The mosque is central to a Muslim, very similar to, should be, and it was certainly in England, the church was a central part of the whole community. In fact, a lot of the city boundaries and town boundaries are based on the presence of a church. And when the colonies, when the people went over to colonize America, many religious people, the first thing they would do is to erect a church, and then they would erect some of the most civic buildings, like the courtrooms and town halls and stuff. The church was central, and the mosque is central to the community of Islam. Its practices are centered around the 5 pillars, like I said before, and today is one of the 3 major monotheistic religions, the other ones being Judaism and Christianity, with diverse cultural expression. Again, I just find it very interesting. Before I have talks with this in a later sessions again, with Pastor Simon. Simon is going to be teaching us, and he has a wonderful ministry in East London. I saw some of that just a few weeks ago. We sat down, had lunch with some of the people that he is affecting and talking to every single week, the Muslims and also Sikhs in the same neighborhood. But he has a profound understanding and a good insight into the Muslim world, and he'll be teaching the next 5 classes. So we're watching this on YouTube. Yeah, we got 5 teachings with this after this one, and we see the whole diversity, diverse cultural expression. And one thing I find very interesting, I'm going to leave you with this, where you have, and we had these Egyptian Muslims we were ministering to in East London many years ago, and they would be watching these belly dances on TV, and the wife said, it helps me to do my housework, and they're all Egyptian belly dances. And I've gone to even some Egyptian restaurants in London, and they literally have belly dances, and as you're eating, and it's part of the entertainment. And yet, in the same part of the world, you would have perhaps in Afghanistan or in some parts of Iran and other places, both Muslim countries, where women can't even show their body and they're totally covered up except for maybe their eyes. And yet, in other Muslim countries, you have so much freedom. You have women who do not walk around with their head coverings, and even have, and that's part of an art form. And incredible moves and dances and stuff. I'm not really into belly dancing, but these are incredible dances, and but you see that diverse. They're both Muslim countries, but there's a lot of diversity in the Muslim world, and we will be dig into that deeper as time goes on, the next 5 weeks. So please keep with us. Invite your friends. So, you can look at this teaching, it'll be on our website. But also invite your friends and especially those interested in just the Muslim culture, Muslim evangelism, things that it's, to pack your arsenal when you're speaking to a Muslim, what to say, what not to say, why say certain things, why are they going to say certain things, why do they say certain things, like things about the Holy Spirit. You're going to be amazed at how they interpret that, or Mary, and just or demonology and salvation. And these are crucial things to understand when you're talking to a Muslim, when you're ministering to a Muslim. So please stick with us. So again, stick around for the Q&A. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we will um, yeah, we would have the time of Q&A. Again, bless you, and I'll see you at the Q&A.